Welcome to the Red Bull Theater Podcast, where guests discuss all things classical theater with your host, Nathan Winkelstein.
Welcome to the Red Bull Theater Podcast. I'm your host, Nathan Winkelstein, and I am so thrilled to welcome today a brilliant character actor, beloved for his TV roles in Lost, Person of Interest, Evil, and many, many others, and also known for his brilliant stage work on Broadway and across the nation in classical and contemporary theater alike. He is the one and only MICHAEL Emerson. Hi, MICHAEL.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Well, thank you so much for agreeing to come on the pod. We're going to be exploring Claudius in Hamlet. This is, I think, our fifth podcast focused on Hamlet, but our first focused on Claudius. And for those of you who want to follow along at home, our touchstone speech for this will be Claudius's soliloquy in Act 3, Scene 3. MICHAEL, you played this role at the McCarter in a production directed by Daniel Fish, right?
I did.
And and also Carrie Preston was in that as well, correct?
Yes, she was the Ophelia.
Wonderful. And has it been a little bit of fun, I hope, going back and reminding yourself of this once you agreed to do this podcast?
Yes, I wish that I feel like I'm a smarter actor now, and I see a bunch of things I could have or should have done with the part back then. It's been 20 years, I think.
Well, that'll actually be really interesting, I think, to talk about, because it feels like this speech is one where a lot of Claudius's core motivations are sort of talked about and left up for interpretation in this speech. And I'll be curious what you did then and what some of the discoveries and thoughts you've had looking at it again might be.
I certainly have more sympathy for the character now, and it balances the play in a different way for me.
I'm glad to hear that, because I very much think I agree. So it'll be very interesting to chat about that. Well, for the people, if you wouldn't mind giving the soliloquy a read for us, and for those of you listening who don't know Hamlet, I'm not sure how many of you there will be, but this is the moment that Claudius, after the play within the play is concerned that his guilt over the killing of his brother is coming to the fore and is questioning his own morality and what to do moving forward, and seeking out his own motivations. And whenever you are ready, MICHAEL.
Oh, my offense is rank, it smells to heaven. It hath the primal eldest curse upon't. A brother's murder. Pray, can I not? Though inclination be as sharp as will, my stronger guilt defeats my strong intent, and like a man to double business bound, I stand in pause where I shall first begin and both neglect. What if this cursed hand were thicker than itself with brother's blood? Is there not rain enough in the sweet heavens to wash it white as snow? Whereto serves mercy but to confront the visage of offense? And what's in prayer but this twofold force, to be forestalled ere we come to fall, or pardoned being down? Then I'll look up. My fault is past, but oh, what form of prayer can serve my turn? Forgive me my foul murder? There cannot be, since I am still possessed of those effects for which I did the murder. My crown, mine own ambition, my queen. May one be pardoned and retain the offense? In the corrupted currents of this world, offence's gilded hand may shove by justice, and oft 'tis seen the wicked prize itself buys out the law. But 'tis not so above. There is no shuffling, there the action lies in his true nature, and we ourselves compelled, even to the teeth and forehead of our faults, to give in evidence. What then? What rests? Try what repentance can? What can it not? Yet what can it, when one cannot repent? Oh, wretched state! Oh, bosom black as death! Oh, limed soul, that struggling to be free art more engaged! Help, angels! Make essay! Bow, stubborn knees, and heart with strings of steel, be soft as sinews of the newborn babe. All may be well.
Thank you, Michael. That was wonderful. That was wonderful.
How Catholic is that speech?
It's so very, very Catholic, but expound on that. Expound on what struck you about that.
He seems like a counterbalance to Hamlet in this play. Both are thoughtful philosophers, questioning duty, forgiveness, all the big subjects. But this is particularly prayerful, I think, and it has the qualities of that plague, it has the notions that plague all doubting Catholics, and that is confession real? Can I be forgiven? Is it magic? And what if I want to keep the things I killed for? Then I can't, how can I in conscience ask for forgiveness?
Well, I think that it's a fascinating thing, and especially the last bit of this question of, can I keep what I want to be forgiven for, and also knowing that when this play was written, that the kind of the question of Protestant versus Catholic is all through this play. Hamlet questions it in terms of Claudius's guilt. Hamlet questions it earlier in the play when he goes, the spirit that I have seen may be the devil, because ghosts shouldn't exist. And so the very fact that ghosts exist is problematic to his religion. And so this question of Catholicism and Christianity, and the fact that at this time, Catholicism, you actually could just pay to have your sins forgiven, supposedly. And you completely dismiss that idea, which is interesting. Like, you go right to the morality of, can I possibly be forgiven and maintain some of those gains? Something that was at the core of the Protestant Reformation was the argument that, no, you can't do that. The Catholic Pope may want to say that you can literally spend money to have your sins forgiven, but we don't believe that, and the Protestant Reformation has happened. Which I find very, very interesting. And obviously, Gutenberg was one of the forefronts of the Protestant movement. Wittenberg was one of the forefronts. So Hamlet was very much questioning this. But as you say, it's very interesting that so does Claudius. What do you think? So when you call him a counterbalance to Hamlet, in what other ways does he counterbalance Hamlet? I'm interested in the idea of him as a fundamentally moral person who has made immoral choices rather than just a bad guy.
Right. Yeah, he's not the remorseless caricature villain of the mousetrap. He, like Hamlet, is a thoughtful and philosophical person, an educated person, a modern man. There are two modern men in this play, Hamlet and his father, and they could have or should have maybe found some peace between them and some fellowship on some level. But Hamlet's father than Ghost, is a different sort of person, not a modern person, Old Testament kind of person, certain of righteousness and vengeance. And that's his program. And I can't imagine that Hamlet had much in common with his real father.
Yes, and depending on how much of a conspiracy theory you want to go down, whether or not he is his real father is, of course. But
yeah, there you go.
Depending on, well, but it's a question that I think often comes up in these plays is and I think it's one of those interesting questions that someone who isn't a practitioner for Hamlet, someone who only watches Hamlet, probably doesn't see this question because it's almost never shown explicitly, but this question of how long has the relationship between Claudius and Gertrude existed? What is the relationship between Claudius and Gertrude? And what were the exact motivations for this takeover are interesting. And of course, one of the fun, very kind of more edge case theories is that Gertrude and Claudius have been into each other for a very long time, and who knows who is Hamlet's actual father. But I wonder for you both how you think about it now and how you did it, how much of an exploration of that backstory between you and Gertrude, and what of your three motivations that you list in this speech, my crown, my known ambition, and my queen, which was primary back then, and whether that's still how you read it today or whether it's changed at all for you?
I didn't think much when I played the part, and I didn't think much about it this week about that backstory. I probably should have considered more the things he was willing to kill for. I just felt like it's probably my Catholic upbringing. I can't get past that he's in a confessional of his own making, and trying to work it out, whether to forgive himself or find forgiveness from some outside agency, which he may or may not believe in. Those are my thoughts, but I like that thing of, giving the moment a longer, maybe darker history.
Well, it's just a really interesting question about the forgiveness because, as you said before, he's not willing to give up these three things. He doesn't seem willing to give up the crown, the ambition, and of course, in the third place, the queen.
Yeah.
And this question of if he is truly seeking forgiveness, the tension between desperately wanting forgiveness but desperately wanting these things that he initially killed for, and how do we do that, seems to be at his core. Not how do I become how do I twirl my mustache?
Oh, right.
It's and I love what you said about the confessional of your own making, because this was actually something I was going to talk about later, but it's interesting from a kind of meta theatrical perspective at this moment in the play that this is the first time that Claudius soliloquizes to us. It's the first time that he turns to the audience. And so there is this, in terms of trying to find forgiveness from God, from self, but also potentially from audience, of like the mediator of like, can I be forgiven? Is this possible? That his questioning soul is to such an extent that he needs to break that fourth wall to question. I always find is a really fascinating moment in the play where this very closed off character suddenly opens himself to the audience and goes, help, help me. How do I seek forgiveness?
Yeah.
And then
this is one of the great achievements of Shakespeare, I think, among many, is the humanizing of villains. You don't see that so much in Marlowe or earlier writers. It's a really modern thing that he does, Iago,
Yeah.
Claudius, and many others, to give them dimensionality, complexity. It's a great thing. And I feel like this speech is the equal of any other soliloquy in the play.
I completely agree. And I think it is, as he was so good at, was so core to a question that was being asked at the time about forgiveness and what it is, and religion, forgiveness and religion, and where those two things overlap. And I remain interested in this, like that he is also a modern man, and this complexity of the villain. Did you, because it's interesting, of course, how this ends is Hamlet comes out and has that very interesting speech where he chooses not to kill you, depending on interpretation of that speech. But if you take the lines literally, he doesn't kill you because he's worried that you're confessing. So you're not sinful in that moment. So if he kills you, then you go to heaven, which isn't revenge. So he needs to wait for you to be evil again. But then at the end of that, you go, shoot, my prayers didn't work. I that all failed. Thoughts never to heaven go. And it's always one of those moments that I actually find borderline funny in the play, because if Hamlet simply hadn't overthought it and had cut your throat there, everything would have worked out. The bad guy goes to hell because you didn't actually achieve forgiveness. And Hamlet has done his revenger. But it's like this moment of suspension that then dissipates in a way that I also find very modern, from, especially compared to other revenger tragedies, very modern from Shakespeare, is that you both are conflicted from the opposite sides of the coin, which is a fascinating tension.
Yeah.
And so when you, just to kind of scroll it back a little bit to the linguistics, how do you, because many actors are different, when you take or in this case, a second look at this speech, but many years later, how do you go about tackling both understanding what you're saying and how to say it? Like, how much does the verse affect you? How much do you pay attention to the verse? That kind of thing. Like, what was your training in that regard?
Well, I'll scan it, or at least it'll be on my mind as I prepare the work, to honor the iambic pentameter. And then my training is kind of to let there be line end breaks. But sometimes in a moment of passion, the language wants to take you forward, wants you to hurtle forward more, caught up in a thought or an emotion, and then you want to just kind of blaze a path. And some people may or may not agree with letting that happen, but I appreciate the structure. This speech is, in a sense, easier than Hamlet's soliloquies, I think, because the language it's more plain. It's the vocabulary is smaller, shorter words, even simpler thoughts, but complex enough. The equations he's spinning or questioning are easily followed, I think.
I agree. Why do you think that is? Because he is a very complex human, right? It's not like Hotspur in the Henrys, where like his sort of rough language is meant to show that he's a rougher soldier and not as much of a speaker. Like Claudius is extremely complex and extremely intelligent. So why do you think this speech, and as we talked about, he's dealing with a deep moral question. Why do you think he's so simple in some ways, linguistically?
Maybe Shakespeare wishes there to be contrast, wishes Claudius to be a more senior man, a more practical man of affairs, a man of the earth, possibly military, less the poet.
That's interesting. Yeah, go ahead.
So then Shakespeare gets two counterbalancing instruments to deliver language.
I like that because I've talked about Hamlet with a number of people on the podcast, and something that has come up a few times is that his soliloquies rarely progress him. He gets, in fact, often his soliloquies are him getting trapped. He sort of has an idea and then gets trapped in it, or he gets trapped in a question. And they're obviously fascinating explorations of those questions, but he rarely comes to a solution.
Right.
Whereas
it's young man stuff.
Right. Yes. And whereas I like the idea of him as like a more mature or more pragmatic thinker, because he does come to a solution here. It's a bad one. He comes to like, well, it doesn't work. But he's truly, you're right that he's driving. He's not asking the question to ask the question. He's asking the question to find the answer. He's really driving for a solution in a way that I'm not sure Hamlet is, which is fascinating.
Yes.
Well, I'm curious about that pragmatism. For you, does the pragmatism of Claudius color other elements of the play? Was that when you sort of think about Claudius's character arc, what is that like one of his fundamental traits, pragmatism? Because I'm sort of thinking about that turn at the end as well with Laertes, when he sort of manipulates Laertes' anger in the way he does.
Yes, he's active. He's an actor. He has agency. He gets things done. That's probably why he only has one soliloquy, because otherwise he's taking care of business, making decisions, setting things in motion.
Yeah. Yeah, and he does finish it in a way that Hamlet, he says, prayers aren't going to work for me. I cannot be forgiven. It's a fascinating end. It's very definitive. And you could not end this speech, but right after this, the prayers without thoughts, never to heaven go. And it does feel like after this in the play, he turns a little bit. He's a little more brutal. It's almost like he's done the Angelo turn, where he's like, which is similar actually, where Angelo faces a religious quandary, decides the actions he has taken make him fundamentally evil, therefore he will be evil because he cannot be good. It feels like maybe that's something Claudius comes to in this speech as well. I'm not certain.
I think so. He is now hellbound. So in for a penny, in for a pound. I'm going to have it all then.
Right. And because
in the here and now.
Yeah, it's interesting because I always think about the turn as being what Claudius sees afterwards in the chamber scene, the killing of Polonius and how mad Hamlet acted towards Gertrude. But it's interesting to think that actually the turn happened before that. And he's ready to use those circumstances towards his end at that point. That had never actually occurred to me, that his turn may actually come in the soliloquy.
Because he didn't spend any time wringing his hands and trying to think what to do after the closet scene. It's like, here's what we do.
Right. Yeah, he's because it's such a short scene. It's like this little tag, and he immediately goes, Hamlet's a problem. We need to pack him away. It's like he's ready for that. He's ready to take that. That's interesting. Whereas like at the beginning of the play, that makes the arc more interesting, because then at the beginning of the play, he might really, as you said, might really want to connect to Hamlet. That's not just for Gertrude's sake, that he may really hope that this can work. Is that how you played it before? Do you remember?
I think he was diplomatic at the top, at the banquet. I didn't think then, but I would now, about how he might need a friend, or it might have made him happy. It might have been a penance for him to at least get along with the child of his brother and his wife's son. Those are things that I neglected, but that would be something to play in what is it, Act 1, Scene 2.
Yeah, it's because it's interesting to piece together the prehistory a little bit, because Hamlet's been gone for a long time. He went to Wittenberg and he like never came back.
Yeah.
And makes you actually wonder about his relationship with his father, that he didn't come back until his father was dead.
Right.
And it seems like Claudius has all of the political stuff in his pocket. It seems like he's been there the whole time. Like he's been at court most of the time in a way that maybe the father wasn't, if he was at war with Norway.
Oh, right.
Which it's interesting that you had already consolidated power probably before the death of the king, especially given that Hamlet didn't become king, which is very strange, right? It's strange that you became king and not Hamlet, which I actually have no answer for. I have no solution for why you were made king over him. Is that something you've considered?
I didn't think deeply about it. I just thought it was because he was there, and because he was able. He was an able leader, a good politician, a good negotiator.
Yeah, I like the idea that he's good at his job. I do think he's good at his job.
Yeah.
And except that he's got this nephew who's not a fan.
Yeah.
But also it's nice to think that maybe that the idea of thinking that you actually like this young man or liked him and want him to be, that it's not you just coddling Gertrude, but truly humoring Hamlet because you hope he'll be with you, is a fascinating take, and makes your journey a little sadder, frankly.
Sure. And I think anything that makes the journey sadder is probably a good thing.
Yes.
And I wish I had thought more about that.
Mm-hmm.
But then Daniel Fish had a different kind of agenda. We didn't have a conversation like that. We had many wonderful conversations, and the show was remarkable in a lot of ways. You can't get it all. That's why we do the plays again.
Mm-hmm.
Because you think, oh man, what if this was a sadder play? What if this play is the tragedy of Claudius?
Yes.
I mean, it's probably not supportable in the long run, but
no, it's fascinating. It's funny because I feel that way about Macbeth, is that people forget that it's the tragedy of Macbeth, and that needs to be your touchstone when you look at that play, is why is it the tragedy of these two characters? It's not the tragedy of Scotland under the Macbeths. It's the tragedy of Macbeth. And so why are the two Macbeths? Why do we care for them? Why are we sad for them? But the tragedy of Claudius. So people on this podcast have heard how I dissect these characters and think about these plays quite a lot. Do you mind sharing a little bit about the type of conversations that happened between you and Daniel Fish, who's obviously a deeply respected director? Like, what other ways are there to explore and find truth and dynamic truth out of these plays?
Daniel has actors contend with a tension between strict line reading and natural emotion. It's a tricky business with him, and it's not for the faint of heart to be in the rehearsal hall with Daniel. It's best to be a flexible, mature, and confident actor, so that because you'll get character notes at the same time you'll get metric notes or line ending notes, or things like that. And I appreciate it because I I had already come to think of my job as more musical than I thought when I was young, that it's like the notes, it's like the words, the text are musical notes, and I am the instrument that will play those notes. And it's up to me to find harmony, melody, rhythm, all of those things. So, and Daniel will often talk musically about the work, and he also brings a lot of music, contemporary music, he brings into the setting. So we had that notion in common, I think, and I was comfortable with it, and I understood what he meant when sometimes other actors were confused or didn't quite know what he meant, or couldn't see how they could do A and B at the same time. But sometimes that's the real goods, is doing A and B at the same time.
I'm fascinated by I'm wondering if, and it may be too long ago for you to be able to do this, I'm wondering if you can give an example of the tension between like a line and the emotional life. And I may be misquoting exactly what you said there, because I'm fascinated. So I'm curious if you are able to give a specific example of what you were referring to.
Well, in the speech, there are places where I want to really get rolling. Since I'm still possessed of those effects for which I did the murder, my crown, my own ambition, and my queen. He might say, but honor the line ending in the second line.
Got it.
Since I am still possessed of those effects for which I did the murder, my crown, my own ambition, and my queen. There's 3 lines in there, and he wants to hear that it's 3 lines.
Got it.
And you think, well, but I gotta make sense of this, some kind of emotional sense. And I think his position would have been, and I don't know that I can speak for him, but he would have said, you can do it, you can do them both. Have both truths in mind and sufficient technical skill to find the compromise.
Yeah, I actually deeply agree with him about that. It's interesting to hear you put it in those terms. I am firmly of the belief that Shakespeare did not write an iambic; he wrote an iambic pentameter, and the pentameter tells you how long the line is, so it matters as part of the verse when the line ends. Yeah. And that Shakespeare. Now, I don't say this. You talked about how Marlowe, for example, tends to have 2-dimensional villains. Something I agree with. I've just ticked off like 72 scholars listening to this, but more 2-dimensional villains than Shakespeare's villains is, I guess, how I'll put that. And similarly, I think Shakespeare specifically discovered a way to truly use the verse as a way to offer rhythmic and I think emotional and character direction to an actor, and that it should be, you should only dismiss it when you've tested it.
Right. I agree with that, and that is a point that that Daniel Fish would make, I'm sure, that by honoring it subtly and in a mature way, you will improve communication and ideation. You will find maybe better meanings to some lines if you play them differently. Play them the way the composer meant them to be played, the way the conductor is trying to get you to play it. Phrases, phrasing.
Yeah, I think that's bang on, and I think that like it's always helpful to remember that Shakespeare didn't have a director, and he was an actor, and his actors were so fluent in this verse form and being able to use the verse itself to help. I mean, it's interesting, your choice of the possessed line. It's one of the very few line endings in this piece, which is actually surprising for late period Shakespeare, or second half period Shakespeare. It's not quite late period, but it surprisingly, this piece has a lot of punctuation on the end of the line, which is more common to early Shakespeare. But one of the things that I have always loved is the idea that Shakespeare figured out that people don't speak in sentences, they speak in thoughts. And that the end of the line is not always where the punctuation goes, it's where the character has to think. And it's where the character has to coin what comes next. So, like, since I am still possessed of what? Of those effects for which I did the murder. And just that little beat of what is it that I'm possessed of? And the little moment of an actor discovering there makes the ideation clearer to the audience. That the character himself is working through a really difficult thing, that it's hard because it's hard. It's not hard because it's Shakespeare. It's hard because the concepts he's trying to think through are hard. So he stops and thinks, not always just on a punctuation, which I love, and I find many of Hamlet's speeches to be deep, important. It's really important to find the end line, mainly because the next thought being thought instead of just being spoken tends to really clear the ideation up. Yeah, that's fascinating. And it sounds like it was more of I like the idea of the music. Do you find that outside of Shakespeare as well? That
I find it in everything I do now. And it's kind of weird. And I felt like it was my own private, weird secret for a long time. But then I began to run into other actors who had the same secret thing, that we were more like singers, and that our methodology was musical. I tend to learn my lines and then I play them different ways musically until I hear it and it sounds right to me. And that the rightness may not necessarily consist in clarity or logic or whatever. It just sounds, it has the right ring. It has maybe enough mystery or surprise in it that it will make an audience listen to it. So, and I think the terms are musical.
I see. I find this so fascinating. I feel like we could talk for an hour just about this, because I feel like the Shakespearean in me, and to some extent the comedian in me, gets very excited by this conversation, because I think that, like, there's a music to comedy, right? There's a very specific tempo and melody and harmony to comedy that makes a comedic play work. Like, a comedic play is a song that needs, and the beats need to be hit. And then truth needs to be found inside that structure. And that it's similar in Shakespeare. But what's interesting to me, especially knowing your career spanning so much TV and film and also contemporary theater work, as well as classical theater work, is not every writer is Oscar Wilde. And not every writer is Shakespeare. And sometimes, so I guess I think that the great writers, the music fits the meaning and the motivation of the character, but that is what makes the great writers great.
Correct.
So what do you do when working, not asking for any specific examples, what do you do when working with text where I don't know, maybe the music is jarring, the harmonies feels, you hear the harmony, but it feels jarring to the character? Am I being clear with this question?
You're completely clear, and you come up against it all the time. If you're on a TV series, it's a different writer every episode, and some are better than others. And you can tell when you're preparing the work whether it sings or not, whether you're instantly beginning to hear how it goes, or whether the language is maybe unpoetical, pedestrian somehow, and is going to be a harder problem to solve. It'll take a little more work, and it may take the tweaking of a word or two to make it, I don't know, make it my own or make it musically viable. But yeah, it's always a problem. And I have seen many's the time I've seen when I had a big moment in a scene, a speech, a soliloquy, if you will, and it was really hard to memorize. And that's always a giveaway for me. And I'll take it to the writers. This is very rare, but I'll go to the writers and say, I'm really struggling with this speech. I feel like there's a better way to say this. I feel like there could be more poetry here. And very often the head writer or someone will say, we're gonna rework that. We'll bring you new sides tomorrow, and it will be fixed. It's a thing. It's a conversation that you can have with the right writers, and they know what you mean, and they will make it sing more. They will put music in it.
It's great. I mean, there's this trope that I use a lot when I'm coaching actors or when I'm directing plays, and it's used all the time in theater, which is the time to throw away the book. The time, like, you write the book, you do all the intellectual work, you do all the motivation work, you do all of the scansion, all of everything, and then you just do it. And you're not thinking, God forbid that Claudius is up there on stage thinking about an end of line or a stressed syllable or what his relationship with Hamlet was when he 20 years ago. Like, that's not, but there's something about, and it's interesting to me because it almost sounds like you do this inverted, which I find fascinating. But there's something to me about throwing away the book is kind of this almost negative trope, toss it, as opposed to like, cool, now let the music play. Like, let go of the intellectual a little bit, let the music play, let it come out of you as feels right and as sounds right musically. But it feels to me like there must be a marriage of all of that intellectual work to help the song play right. But it feels like you're almost so instinctive that you almost hear the music before you've intellectualized text. Is that true, or am I misunderstanding?
Well, I mean, you recognize a good speech the first time you read through it. You go, oh, this thing takes care of itself. We will have a field day with this speech because the goods are baked in.
Right.
And other things require more work, and some things never get fully solved.
So like with Shakespeare, with the maybe the greatest, I would say the greatest, but I guess maybe the greatest English playwright ever. Do you tend to then just trust the music, like read the speech, trust the music of the speech, and go and just see what happens to you? Is that at your core what you do with speeches? Obviously, there's more to it. I'm reducing it, but fundamentally,
this musical analysis that I'm talking about, it's already there in Shakespeare. It's every line. It's inescapable. So you just let that be. And maybe that's where I got the notion of musicality. You might call it poetry too, for that matter, however you mean that word.
Yeah.
But no, I know when I come to Shakespeare, it'll be easy to memorize, but it'll be lots of homework. It'll be lots of, like we talked about, the getting down in the trenches with scansion and meter and not settling for the first interpretation you had or what you thought a line meant, or you mine it for more goods, and they are there to be had if you're smart and you really dig in. But it's quite an undertaking.
And how do you think for people who are, this is a hard question. For people who are trying to explore text, who maybe are not professional actors or are professional actors who didn't train specifically in Shakespeare, how do you begin that process? Because a lot of the times when I'm working with people, it can feel overwhelming. And like I'll make a line or a meaning clear to them, and they'll be like, I get it now that you said it, but I don't know how I would do that on my own. And is there, it's a hard question because of course you're so advanced in this that sometimes it's hard to go like, what is that core thing that someone could do at home staring at a text that starts them on the journey of finding all of these extra gifts that Shakespeare has in the text? Do you have any thoughts on that?
God, I mean, if you could only quantify it, but it just seems like it seems like you need people need to read more and memorize more. If people spent more time with text, if they read more poetry or they read harder stuff that doesn't yield meaning at first glance or whatever, stuff that needs to be taken apart and put back together, it would begin maybe to become a habit or a tool that would be useful if you meant to be a stage performer. But not everybody wants to do antique plays. But if you want to do them, it's not for the faint of heart.
Well, this reminds me a little bit of everybody's least favorite question at a post-show conversation. How do you memorize all those lines? And I remember I was in a production of Henry IV at Shakespeare Theater Company, and Ed Jarrow was playing Henry IV, and he got that question, and he said, "But in seat, is there's not a shortcut. You keep reading it and mining it and digging it, and it'll be slow going at first, but you get better at it. It's a muscle. But you work at it. It sounds like is
And
what we're saying.
Shakespeare helps you more than any other writer.
What do you mean by that?
Because one of the functions of poetry is to be memorable. That's why we have meter. That's why we have rhyme. All of those, it's like song lyrics. Why can you hear a song one time and you can sing along with the chorus the next time it plays on the radio? Because it sticks. It's got memorability. And Shakespeare, I don't worry much with Shakespeare, and it stays with you over time too. I'll do a season's worth of a TV show, and I could not do any of the speeches I did that season 3 months later because they're just gone. It's in and out, but they linger in some memorious part of the brain and keep coming back. The like anything that we can quote, whether it's something from a Dylan song or something from Shakespeare or some children's book we read, so that those are, it's ancient and it's childish and it's a high function of the human brain. And getting that stuff to stick. But I have been defeated by text. I have done plays that whipped me, that I could not play, plays written in more modern and abstract ways, less logical, less metric, less lyric, more like a mathematical undertaking or something, and then plays where you can lose your way and not find your way back. It's terrifying. So I don't fear that with Shakespeare ever. I've drifted from your question, I think.
No, it's wonderful. No, it's very interesting because it continues the mathematical thing. It continues to clarify to me the music element, because there's the literal musicality of meter. The same reason, as you say, the same reason as lyrics are easy to remember. But then there is music, great music tells a story. It makes narrative sense from beat to beat to beat to beat to beat, and it moves you. And it's very. I'm lucky enough to have some very highly accomplished musicians in my family, and you ask them about notes, and they're like, what about that's not what they're doing. They're not, in the same way that we're not really saying words. We're using the words.
Yeah.
And that there's so I think that some people might hear one say it's musical and go, it's mathematical. And that's not the case, though I would say there is, not to go too far astray, there are some forms of math that are beautifully logical and stunning and astonishing, but that's a very particular little pocket. But that there's that part of what you're saying with the musicality is that it tells the story, the narration moves with it, takes you on the journey narratively, not just audibly, which is, and I agree. I mean, there's something about Shakespeare, there's something about his imagery, there's something about his meter, his language, where I remember, I performed Hamlet a decade ago, and I probably remember half his lines. They don't go away. And that's a very deep part, I think, of why he's with us so much, along with the humanity that you talked about at the very beginning, and just how human his characters are, I think is deeply enmeshed for us.
The payoff for your homework is it's thrilling. It makes a person so happy, or it makes me so happy to hear a thought expressed exquisitely. And that's why it'll stick better, and you'll keep going back to it. It's just the rush of perfect communication.
I do. It's funny you say that, because I think that, like, Shakespeare, sometimes acting teachers will say, like, that the objective, like, to communicate is not a powerful enough objective. I sometimes disagree in Shakespeare. Because I think what truly separates him, like, there's the humanity of the characters, but part of that, what truly separates him, I feel like, from his contemporaries is what his characters are communicating, is the fact that this soldier on the battlements of his fortress, as he's considering murdering a king, can describe pity as a naked newborn babe striding the blast, or heaven's cherubim horsed upon the sightless couriers of the air. That these, like, how do you describe pity? Well, that's how you describe pity, right? It's like he manages to describe close to the indescribable, and just watching someone think through that and communicate it so beautifully is, I think, one of the most thrilling elements of Shakespeare. It's a thrilling element of this speech, actually, is this speech thinks through an incredibly complex moral quandary extremely clearly. And it's so interesting watching not an actor do that, but watching a character do that.
Yeah.
Is a thrilling experience. Yeah, I think I've said this on the podcast before, but and I always forget who said it, but somebody said that like the evolution of man is the evolution of self-knowledge, not the evolution of muscles or anything, but like the evolution of insight, basically. And that Shakespeare's characters are more insightful than we are today, which means they're more highly evolved humans, even though they were written 400 years ago, than we are today. And Shakespeare will always be relevant until we catch up, until we evolve to meet these characters. Right. So we're almost insulting Claudius and Hamlet by calling them modern men. They're future men. Yeah. They're more self-aware than we are. They're more insightful than we are, which is fascinating. Well, that's great. I mean, this has been such a wonderful conversation, Michael. Thank you for agreeing to engage in this with me. And is there anything else? Any parting thoughts from your end?
Oh, I'm grateful for you sending me back to text this week. I was a little rusty, I think, so it's been therapeutic for me to have to dig back into this speech and to spend a little time thinking about this process, this kind of artistic problem-solving process. It was I'm happy to have done it.
Well, I am grateful that this could be such a pleasure for you. It was certainly a pleasure for me. And I mean, it's the thing I most love in the world. So it's really terrific to get to share it with you and with our audience, who I know deeply appreciate it as well. Thank you so much for your time today, Michael.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And thank you, everybody, for listening. Our revels now are ended. Until next time, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in to the Red Bull Theater Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review on your favorite podcasting platform. Your support helps us to bring you more captivating conversations and insights into the world of classic theater. To stay updated on our latest activities, follow us on social media, get on our mailing list, and visit www.redbulltheater.com, where you'll find an abundance of podcasts, readings, classes, seminars, productions, and more. Your support makes all of this possible, so please consider making a tax-deductible donation on our website to help us continue bringing classical theater to contemporary audiences. Until next time, thanks, and ever thanks.